So without any further ado, we're going to bring on Mr. Joseph Lewis. Hello.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. Now, I met you on LinkedIn, and when I
Yes.
read your bio, um, writing is what you do.
Well,
Yes.
yeah,
How many books do you have published right now?
I have 9 books out right now, and my
Wow.
10th is going to drop January of 2025. So I tell people that I write one a year. It's very much like giving birth, although I've not had that experience. Don't really want it, but it's from idea to publication. It takes about 9 months to a year for me.
What is your writing process when you are ready to sit down and write that book? Do you have a goal of writing a certain number of pages a day, or do you do any planning or any outlining before you begin? How does your process work?
I am not an outliner. I'm truly a pantser. What I do is I do a lot of what I call pre-writing in my head. So when I sit down with my laptop and I try to write about an hour and a half, 2 hours a day, um, I have an idea of what I want to write for that evening or that day.
Mhm.
Sometimes I nail it. Other times the characters take over and take me in a completely different
Yes.
direction. I can tell you that in Fan Mail, which is my most recent book, that is the only time that I knew what the ending was going to be like after the first 2, 3 chapters that I had written. I knew what was going to be said, where it was going to be said, and how it was going to end. And so what I did is I stopped writing where I was and I wrote the last 2 chapters. And all I did then is fill in the middle, right to that very end. Um, and by and large, when I did the editing, and when my beta readers read it and did any kind of suggestions, we left the 2 final chapters alone. They did not change. It was that solid.
Yeah, this isn't something you just, even though you say you're a pantser, I don't know. You're not exactly writing by the seat of your pants. You already know where you're going.
Well, yes, I don't. I guess you could say I have an outline in my head,
Yeah.
but it's not written down on paper, and I don't even know if I'd call it an outline. I would say that I have a character in mind and a direction that I want to go, and then sometimes in my book Betrayed, that started out to be a story about George and his brothers, but very quickly it was told through the eyes of Brian. Um, and he was the one who was telling that particular story.
And you
It's
didn't plan that?
pardon me?
You didn't plan for the story to
No,
be told through Brian's eyes?
no, that came about, I want to say about halfway through. And then I had to do some tweaking towards the end, towards the beginning, when I did the edits and things like that, because it had to be thorough and consistent.
Mhm.
But it sometimes it just happens that the best laid plans, I guess, kind of fall apart,
Yes.
and happily so, because it made for a much better story. Betrayed was a Maxie Award winner. It was a Pencraft Award winner. It was a finalist for Best Thrillers. And so some really nice things happened, I think, as a result of me switching that particular character. I should say the point of view.
So do you always write about younger people, and are they high schoolers or are they young adults?
They started out at age 12 in the book. Taking Lives. Taking Lives was a prequel to a trilogy, and it was based upon my work with as a counselor. I volunteered with the Wetterling Foundation for Stranger Abducted Children, and my job was to educate parents on how to take care of their kids, educate caring adults on how to take care of children, but really educating kids on how to take care of themselves, spotting signs and things like that. That was my job. So it was all of the discussions that I've had with parents, with kids, and then as a counselor, you hear it all. Each day you think, well, it can't get any worse. Well, a whole lot of times it does. And so a lot of their stories were in my trilogy, the Lives trilogy.
How do you find your ideas for each of them? First of all, well, before you even answer that question, um, why did you choose to center your stories around young people instead of adults?
I think it's because my background, as a teacher, coach, counselor, administrator for, like I said, about 48, 49 years now, I got to know those kids really well. We adopted our son, Will, Kim and I did, when he was age 7. And the funny story about that is that he was supposed to be here in time for our wedding. But our government, the Guatemalan government, put up some roadblocks, like that happens in adoptions. And so we ended up getting pregnant with Hannah and giving birth. And 1 month and 1 day after her birth, I'm on a plane to Guatemala to go get Will. So we ended up with 2 kids, not knowing English, and our Spanish was un poquito, and really ugly. And so I tell people that we were trilingual: English, Spanish, and charades. A whole lot of charades. So, and I think my background with kids that kind of drives it, and then my experience in Kim's experience adopting, I think, has a lot to do with my patchwork family of adopted kids.
Well, that's beautiful. So you have your own child that came by birth, and then you adopted a child from Guatemala.
Yes. And then Emily came a little bit later than that. So
okay,
so we have two daughters and a son. Unfortunately, in July of 2014, my son was shot and killed.
Oh no!
He was walking the streets in Chicago on his way back from lunch, and he was a fashion photographer, and he got caught between one gang trying to kill a rival gang member, and my son was used as a shield so the intended victim could get away, and my son died. So at the same time, my book Taking Lives was coming out, and so it's one of those things where you're so sad and caught up with the the grief,
yes,
that you really couldn't celebrate the joy of having my first book written. And it sounds selfish, and I don't mean to sound it that way. It's just the two worlds collided in this ironic, ugly way. In terms of how I get my ideas, Stephen King, in his book on writing, and if you're a writer or interested in writing, that's a book
excellent book.
Oh yeah, has to be on your bookshelf. But he has a statement in there that come in the most unexpected ways, and it's 1 or 2 ideas, maybe 3, that collide, and that's what happens. In my book Caught in a Web, I was reading the newspaper, and on the first page it was talking about the rise of adolescent deaths due to fentanyl and heroin. And then I read a little bit further. I think it was like the 3rd or 4th page in. It was talking about the rise of MS-13, which is a very violent gang that was encroaching into Northern Virginia, where I'm from. And I had the idea to put the 2 together. And that became the basis of Caught in a Web. In fan mail, it was me watching this talk show about these fans discussing fans who become stalkers, and how sometimes they can be really deadly and scary. They end up in their houses, how they got there, nobody knows. And so that's kind of how I got that idea, but they come in the most odd and assorted ways. It's almost serendipitous how it happens.
Absolutely. Wow. So I'm